You know, for a long time, people have had conversations about, and they still continue to have conversations about screen time and how much screen time is appropriate for a child. And the conversation that we're trying to turn in our district, both with staff and with parents, is that it's not screen time per se, it's what they're doing during that time. So if they're just consuming, scrolling through TikTok and just watching video after video after video, there's not a lot of value to that typically. But if they're reading a book or they're creating a project, that's a whole different type of learning for a student and, beneficial to them. And so we're trying to change the conversation a little bit around how do they make them digitally healthy and balance the use that they're doing with their technology devices.
You're listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This is our District Talk segment where we interview district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday shine online. Now, let's get back to the interview.
My name is Krestin Bahr, and I am the superintendent of Peninsula School District, which is located in Gig Harbor, Washington, and Key Peninsula. We have 9,000 students, over 17 schools.
Hi, I'm Kris Hagel. I'm the Executive Director of Digital Learning for the Peninsula School District in Gig Harbor, Washington. We're a 9,000 student school district about an hour south of Seattle.
The prevalence of technology in the classroom impacted student learning and engagement.
The presence of technology in the classroom is what used to be something that was nice to have. It's now critical to the learning of our students. We understand that all students are going to be utilizing technology for their entire life. It's not a subject anymore like it used to be. It's interwoven into every classroom and into every activity that teachers are doing. And so teachers are constantly finding new and interesting ways to engage our students, bring them on board and keep them impacted while they're learning.
I love how you said that, Kris. It's interwoven. I do think that everything we're doing is now going to be interwoven. The next question I have for you is, how can school districts deal with social media issues that may originate on an app or on social media like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, but then might create a very real in-person problem on campus in the district, either that same day or Monday morning when we go back to school?
So absolutely, we know, and we know firsthand. In fact, we know that this happened last week. We know that our students are digital natives, and we know that they live on and off their devices. And as we saw last week, we had an issue. There are pros and cons, however. The amount of time that we have to solve problems is instantaneous. And the good thing is that we are so connected that we have outside people, we have parents, and we have other students that are reporting information about anything immediately. And so we had an incident last week that my executive director of digital learning, who is also our communications person, we knew within moments. We were able to call law enforcement immediately and get immediate response while we were figuring it out. It did occur that it was not as serious as it originally had been reported to us, but that is the kind of age that we are in now. We have to be prepared. We have to know that we have an immediacy and the detail to safety. And we rely on our students to be those digital natives and report things immediately to us. So there's pros and cons, but that is the world that we are existing in now. We can't wish it away. We can't wish that our students didn't have access to devices, whether it's laptops or typically it's phones, Snapchat, Instagram, all of those things. So we also, as grownups and people that are running and leading districts, have to be adept and learn quickly and use the devices as well.
Absolutely. I love how you basically were saying that we were swift and serious in our response. And even if we reacted in a way and it was less of an issue, we responded in the right way. I absolutely love that. Now let's move on to the positive side of things. My next question, because social media isn't all bad, even though I often, one of our life's mission at Smart Social is to protect students from the safety. Sometimes there's some good that comes out of it. And that's what I want to lead into in question number 3. Can you provide some examples of how your students may have used their social media in a positive or productive way, whether it's on campus or at home, that may have benefited themselves or their community or launched them into their future with a little bit of a portfolio or resume? Do you have a story or example for us?
So we had some students that really wanted to do a public service announcement, PSAs, for their passion project. And they came to our board meeting and shared those. And they were all the way from like food insecurity on the Key Peninsula and food drives to safety, suicide prevention, all of those things. And so we're finding that our students are having a voice and they want to have the impact for changing lives. And we know that that has always been for young people, but their ability to be able to access the media and public immediate and have really quality. I mean, they're using all different kinds of tools, making movies. They're putting on their own podcasts, right? Their voice is out there in a positive way. And so they are able to tell stories and to highlight the great work and highlight their schools and people within the schools and how grateful they are. That's what we're finding after the pandemic, that students really are enjoying being back together in person and talking back and forth and having those connections and using social media.
That's terrific. In the age of one-to-one, how are you preparing students for positive technology use, both in the classroom and also at home?
For years, we've been, working on all of our teachers teaching digital citizenship. It's a pretty important thing. It's been becoming more and more important. Um, Recently we started working a little bit more closely with parents, talking to them, and we're kind of couching it, not just digital citizenship, because sometimes that gets a negative connotation, but more on the digital wellness front. What does it look like for your child to be a healthy digital human, a healthy and digitally well student? And so talking to them about some of the things that are out there, for a long time, people have had conversations about, and they still continue to have conversations about screen time and how much screen time is appropriate for a child. And the conversation that we're trying to turn in our district, both with staff and with parents, is that it's not screen time per se, it's what they're doing during that time. So if they're just consuming, scrolling through TikTok and just watching video after video after video, there's not a lot of value to that typically. But if they're reading a book or they're creating a project, that's a whole different type of learning for a student and, beneficial to them. And so we're trying to change the conversation a little bit around how do they make them digitally healthy and balance the use that they're doing with their technology devices.
That's an excellent answer. The next question I have for you is, how have you and your community at your school district been successful in increasing parent engagement to help keep students safe on social media?
So that is tied to our strategic plan. We are in the first year of our strategic plan around community engagement. And we have a district PTA/PTO group that represents all 17 of our schools. And we meet with them regularly, bi-monthly. And so that was the topic and the conversation that we had early in the year. We also had the opportunity to share with our faith leaders in Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula, and had the opportunity to put on some webinars, but also some face-to-face. And so I'd like Kris Hagel to talk a little bit about the work that he has done in parent outreach and communication.
Sure. So we've put together, mostly these are based on a book that Richard Collada, who's the CEO of ISTE and now ASCD as well, put out a couple years ago. I think it's titled Digital for Good, Raising Healthy Digital Humans. And we built a presentation around that to kind of talk with parents about what can they do in their homes to create a better foundation for their students with their devices, with their cell phones, with their district issued devices. And so we spent a lot of time. We did 4 in-parent meetings this year. We also worked with some other outside groups to have other parent meetings in their arenas, like the YMCA, and help coordinate with them. So we've done quite a bit this year around digital wellness and digital health for students.
Excellent. Now, Are there any stories that might come to mind about any social media incidents you've been able to get in front of or avoid by being proactive?
I have a pretty good story on this one. And I don't know if it's proactive as much as just adjusting the way that you're acting towards some of these social media incidents. So, like most schools, we have these Instagram sites or these Snapchat sites or whatever that are bullying. They're harassment of the kids in the schools. And so a couple of years ago, or no, it was last year, I think, one of our schools said, "Hey, what can we do? The social media companies won't let us. We report these sites, they don't help us. They won't take them down." And so we started working, and I had a conversation, and I said, let's have a conversation with your leadership kids. Let's talk about, is this what they want their school to look like when somebody sees them online on social media? Do they want the only thing to be is the harassing and the bullying site on Instagram, or do they want to, talk about the good things that are happening in the schools? And working through the leadership class and the leadership teachers, they were able to create their own separate Instagram account that just all the kids were going out constantly feeding the positive stories that are happening in the high school, the positive things that were happening, the positive things they were seeing kids do in the hallways. And it really turned the page on what was going on with some of these more not appropriate sites or inappropriate things that were happening on social media. And so that was a really good positive story that we've had in the past.
So, what would your advice be to other educators, other administrators to work together to create a culture of digital safety and responsibility in their schools and in their community?
I think one of the biggest things these days is historically the conversations around digital safety have come primarily from the technology leaders. And I don't think that that can be the case anymore. This needs to be a collaborative effort, not just the technology department in a school district, but it's all leadership. We've done some really nice parent nights that were co-presented between the counseling department and technology, or building administrators and technology, just trying to make sure that it's not just this one thing anymore. It's impacting all of our lives. And so everybody's responsible. We have reached out to others in the community, the YMCA, our faith leaders, and try and have those conversations with them as well, to try and make sure that this conversation is growing in a bigger place than just the small little caverns that it might have had conversations in the past.
I've been an educator for close to 39 years, going on 39 years, and I think that it's never been more important for us to have our community partners as well as our parents understand where we are in terms of education. So as we have come out of a pandemic about a year and a half into it, what we're finding is that students are very adept at using all kinds of social media tools. And what's been interesting in our community, when we have an issue that occurs, it's not necessarily the students. Actually, students have been coming to us with information, and they're pretty apt to come in terms of safety and security. We are working on our sense of belonging, because attaching and feeling confident in school is one of our priorities, of course, as a public school entity. But what we're finding is that the community at large, the adults in the system, whether it's a Facebook group that occurs, they take information and then it really becomes problematic for the schools. Things are taken out of context, or rumors happen that are not true. And so really we have to have our community part of our solution as we move forward. Kris and I have a plan for next year, really getting out into the community, talking about Chat GPT, talking about AI and the use of. We have leaned into that in our school district. We're trying to get way ahead of it. Our teachers are on board. And at the same time, we have a duty, we feel, for the public at large. Many of them don't have school-age children, to be able to put parameters around what is allowable and what is said and what is not said. We find that our students, I don't know if you agree, Kris, but I think our students are pretty savvy, and they're pretty appropriate. Savvy might be the good word, right? They're way ahead of us. They're watching the adults in the system, trying to catch up. So we're trying to partner with our students, having student voice, having student leadership around this, around social media. But we find that most of our issues are in the community with people that are certainly out of high school and beyond. There seems to be a generational gap.
Yeah, that's a great tip. What's your biggest social media concern for the future?
I think my biggest social media concern right now is that we are doing a lot, our teachers are doing a lot, and it still feels like it's not enough. Um, we're fighting against an industry that pays to make sure that you're paying attention to what they're doing. And so our kids, have come out of the pandemic, in some cases in better places, some cases not as well as far as their mental health is concerned. And I think some of the work that we are trying to do to help them is sometimes combated by the big social media companies. And so for me, that's one of the biggest concerns I have right now is, how can we continue to do what we need to do when it feels like we're working against the way that things are going in the system?
My biggest concern at this time and into the future is that currently it seems like it's the Wild West, that there are no standards, there are no brackets, there are no bumpers for our children. And so the unknown, the impact of AI, with, pictures and information, the lack of transparency in many of these social media networks. I worry that public education, that educators, I worry about the next generation and what that is going to look and sound like. We want to be partners in the future. We want to be partners with our social media conglomerates. We want to be able to have a voice in that. We know that other countries have done that. We know other countries have asked for limitations or asked for cooperation on behalf of the children that they serve. And so that's what I worry about, the lack of being part of the process. I don't know that any of us are invited into the process, and yet we will be responsible for the delivery.
So true. Excellent points. Okay, my last question for you here is funding is difficult. What advice would you give to other school districts to secure funding to create resources that parents need?
Kris Hagel, take that, because we have pretty amazing. We have passed a levy first time, Proposition 2, which was safety security levy. So I'm going to have Kris go ahead and talk.
Sure. So I think there's two different ways to look at getting funding for creating some of these resources. First is we just, for the first time ever, passed a safety, security, and technology levy in our district, a 6-year levy that's going to provide funding for us to do some of this work. Another one that I think has helped us a lot this year is we got a grant from our state superintendent of public instruction around, with a few other districts in the state of Washington, to create digital citizenship and media literacy resources to be shared throughout the entire state. And so we were able to utilize that grant funding to pull in some of our teachers and some of our certificated librarians and bring them into the conversation and say, here are the Washington state standards around digital citizenship. How can we create lessons that make it easy for our teachers to be able to teach this in the classroom without having a ton of that background knowledge? And so I know the state plans, as soon as we get all of this finished, the state plans to release all of that out as open educational resources. So there will be some things that are available for everyone to use. But we were able to secure a grant that helps do some of that work this year. And I think that's really going to help us drive next year's conversations around digital citizenship forward.
Josh, the only other thing that I would say in terms of that is really partnering with legislators to have them know and understand deeply. We know that there are many new legislators every session. And so being proactive in that and inviting your legislators in, both at the state and federal level, so that they can see boots on the ground, what it looks and sounds like, and bringing really smart educators to that conversation. Because it must be a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're creating a priority. What Kris said is defining what we need to build. And then also I love just that conversation and inviting boots on the ground. Like you said, they actually want to get to know the constituents. So very smart, very wise. And really, the theme so far has been work together. I love that. Thanks for listening to our smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This was our District Talk segment where we interview school district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday launch into their future by shining online. This episode was brought to you by our smartsocial.com VIP program. It's called the Very Informed Parent Program, which helps you engage your students with teen-led video lessons. Stay one step ahead with our premium parent newsletter and discover hidden features on trending apps on teens' phones and our 54 plus live parent and student-friendly events every single year. You can click on the link below to chat with one of our team members if you want a free pass to our VIP program to support your community with our smartsocial.com resources. And if you're a district leader who has a success story, we would love to feature you on a future episode. You can click the links below to reach out. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a great day.